Hello, I'm Glen Hiemstra, founder of Futurist.com. Welcome to this short sample of my keynote speaking.
Now, if you look at this model, you'll see the preferred future also has one little tiny portion of it which is outside the possibility cone. It's my favorite part. It's the part of the vision that everybody in the room laughs at and says, that's impossible, you can't do that. But you already pointed out that probably the visions that made the biggest difference in this area historically were the very visions that most people laughed at and said, well, that one is impossible. That's the one that you'll never do. But sometimes you figure out how to do those. And so give yourselves permission to think not just about things that you think are possible, but even dream the impossible if you want to. And the sign said, the train takes exactly 21 seconds to pass this crossing, whether you're on the tracks or not. And as he retold that story, for him it captured 4 alternative responses to the future, which I want you to think about this afternoon. One response is to get on the tracks and try to stop the future from happening. The odds are against you. The 4th response is to get on the train, move ahead to the engineer's compartment, and help to steer or control the train. Imagine in front of you an array of tracks and switches and an ability to choose which track you're going to go down and how fast you're going to go. That is the response that I think of as inventing the future. Why is this an important question? It's a fun question. It's a kind of entertaining question. What is your image of the future? But it's a vital question. Here's why. Our images of the future, whether it's the future that we expect to happen that we want to get ready for, or the future that we're afraid might happen that we would like to try to avoid, or the future that we would prefer to have happen, the future we'd like to create, whatever that image is, exerts an influence over the choices and the decisions that we make today. We're sitting around tables 20 years from now and saying, you know, life is really quite different than it was back there in the year 2001. What is it that we'll be talking about? Well, think about how we organize life in the 20th century, the century that we all grew up in and are quite familiar with. We organized life into around certain pillars. And these pillars were, in truth, relatively unique to the 20th century, but they became so much a part of our lives, they were so much a part of our lives, that we take them for granted. We, in a sense, assume that this is the way life has always been. And of course, in history, it's not true, but these are the 5 pillars. Everyone will have a job. In the 21st century, what's replacing jobs is stints. And I'll talk a little bit about that. In the 20th century, we'll retire when we reach a certain age, and we'll live the rest of our life in Palm Springs playing golf. And we'll never work again. A 20th century invention which is changing already and is certainly going to change in the next quarter century. We will live in a home that is isolated from where we work. A whole new thinking about homes that grew up in the 20th century. The government will solve all large social problems. And learning will take place in schools. Houses became, in the 20th century, an aberration of what homes were for the whole of human history for tens of thousands of years as we understand it. What did your house become in the 20th century? Whether it's an apartment or a large mansion, it doesn't matter. Our houses became a place where we eat on average 1 meal a day, we sleep, and we store our personal possessions. Right? That's what houses are. And that's an aberration of what houses were for tens of thousands of years. Houses were the center of life, where you were born and where you died, where you were taken care of when you were sick, where most learning took place, where most entertaining took place, and of course where most work took place, whether it was in the back 40 or the shop downstairs. But in the 20th century, we separated houses from where we work, and we made them this place where we eat a meal and we sleep and we store our possessions. So our lifestyle is mostly like this, and this is true for a majority of people in the United States. We all get up about 6 or 6:30 in the morning, and we get in a vehicle, and we travel about, the US average is 22 minutes, to this place where we work. Now, I'm sure it's true for everybody in this room, and it's true for a majority of people who work in the US. What do we do for about 8 hours? Well, basically, we talk to each other on telephones, we have little meetings with each other, and we pick up pieces of paper and we hand them back and forth, right? And we do that for about 8 hours, and then we get in our vehicle and we travel back to our home, where, what do? We eat our 1 meal, we stare at our possessions for about 2 hours, and then we sleep. And the odd thing is, right, isn't that's life in 2001. And the strange thing is we think, man, this is really living. People never had it so good. This is an amazing statistic that of all the 65-year-olds who ever lived in the history of the world, 2/3 of them are alive today. And these are estimated worldwide numbers. We know that historically people lived to be 65, but they were relatively rare. Now, of course, it's very common to live to be 65. Now, if you make 65 in the US, you're going to live 20 more years. That's the average today. If we make routine, not to mention really hoped for advances in healthcare, biotechnology, and so on, how much longer after 65 are you going to live? Well, if you're a part of the younger part of this audience, you're probably going to live another 30 years, perhaps even another 40 on the outside. 20 years from now, when I'm 70, and some of you are going to be in that age bracket, some of you are a bit younger, but some of you are going to be in that age bracket, when you walk down the average city street in the United States, 1 out of every 4 or 5 people you see is going to be over 65. What is your image of the future? When you think of the world 20 years from now, do you see a quarter of the population over 65? What does that really mean? It means that we're conducting this massive social experiment. And the experimental question is, how are we going to organize society? Now, they are the digital native generation. Why? Well, it's quite obvious. They're the first generation to grow up since computers. And if they're in their younger half of that group, born since, say, around 1990, so if they're in high school now or junior high now, they have been born since the internet. And it makes them substantially different from all the rest of us in that they approach all of these kinds of tasks of sort of everyday living differently than the rest of us because they do it on the net first. Every task begins with the internet. Whether it's shopping or dating or doing homework or asking a question, every task begins with the internet or some kind of electronic communication device. Now, if you were not born in that time period and you were born earlier than that, you are a digital immigrant. It's called augmented reality. It's going to be the future of communication, and it becomes important in a moment when we look at the future of learning and education. But remember what computers were like about 1980, and how many of us had them versus how many of us didn't have them. And Colin Angle says robots, personal robots, home robots, learning robots are about where computers were in 1980. Time shift, therefore, 27 years in the future. And the spread of robots and their ability to assist us in doing things could be, he believes, comparable to where computers are today. They're developing flexible electronics, like wearable electronics, so that 10 or 20 years from now, you'll walk past somebody with clothing that looks like this. I'll like the pattern on that person's clothing. It's called viral fashion. There's some people working on it. And I will give my clothing a command, and now it will look like the person who just walked past me. Because it's made out of flexible electronics that can change what it looks like upon command. So technologies will drive us and confront us with very huge challenges. The biggest challenges of all, I think, are the great divides, the religious divides in the world, the economic divides in the world, and the education divides in the world. And when a community gets together to ask, how can we build a better learning society, I think above all you have to confront the education and economic divides that exist. What is your image of the future? Do you have an image of the future? What is it? What do you think is probably going to happen that's going to influence your business? What is possible that's outside the boundaries that you normally think in? Most importantly, what really is your preferred future for yourself professionally, for your organization?
If you'd like to arrange a program, contact us through the website Futurist.com, or send us an email, or give us a call, and we'd look forward to talking to you.